Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Blake, and today we're diving into a topic that affects all of us at some point in our lives. What makes a good teacher? This is a subject that can spark so many thoughts, because teaching is not just about sharing knowledge. It's about inspiring, guiding, and connecting with students. Now, before we start, I want you to really listen carefully. Pay attention to how I describe ideas, give examples, and use advanced English phrases. This episode is perfect for C1 and C2 learners who want to improve listening, vocabulary, and comprehension. So, what comes to mind when you think of a good teacher? For me, it's not just someone who knows a lot about their subject. Knowledge is essential, of course, but it's only the beginning. A truly good teacher can make complicated ideas simple without making students feel small or incapable. They can explain complex concepts using examples that students can relate to in their daily lives. For instance, if a math teacher can link an abstract formula to real-life situations, students suddenly see the relevance of learning it. That's something I admire a lot. Another quality that stands out is empathy. Good teachers understand that every student is different. Some may grasp concepts quickly, while others need more time. A teacher who is patient and observant can adjust their teaching style to support each learner. Imagine a language teacher who notices a student struggling with pronunciation. Instead of just correcting them harshly, they offer gentle exercises, repeat words clearly, and encourage the student to practice in a fun, stress-free way. That kind of support makes learning enjoyable and effective. Then there's passion. Passionate teachers are infectious. When you see someone excited about their subject, it motivates you to engage more deeply. For example, think about a history teacher who doesn't just list dates and events, but tells stories about the people who lived during those times. Suddenly, history feels alive, and students remember it much better. Passionate teaching often leaves a long-lasting impression. Communication skills are also crucial. A teacher might be very knowledgeable, but if they can't express ideas clearly, students might feel confused or overwhelmed. Strong communication doesn't just mean speaking well. It also includes listening carefully to students, asking the right questions, and giving feedback in a constructive way. For example, a teacher might notice that a student understands the topic but struggles to express it in writing. By giving specific tips and examples, they guide the student toward improvement without making them feel criticized. Let's not forget adaptability. Today, classrooms are changing rapidly. Technology, diverse learning styles, and different educational needs require teachers to adapt constantly. A good teacher isn't rigid. They experiment with teaching methods, integrate new tools, and adjust lessons based on student responses. For instance, a science teacher might use virtual simulations to explain a complex experiment instead of relying solely on textbooks. This flexibility can make learning more interactive and memorable. Also, a sense of humor can go a long way. Learning can be stressful, especially at advanced levels like C1 or C2. Teachers who can lighten the mood and incorporate humor without distracting from the lesson create a positive environment where students feel comfortable taking risks and making mistakes. And as we know, mistakes are an essential part of learning. Now, let's talk about some daily life examples that show these qualities. Think about your favorite teacher in school or university. Why did you like them? Maybe it was because they remembered your name, asked about your weekend, or shared a story that connected with your experience. These small gestures show care and attention, and they build a sense of trust. Students learn more when they feel respected and valued. Another example could be a language teacher who organizes weekly discussion sessions. Instead of just teaching grammar, they create opportunities for students to speak, share opinions, and debate topics. This not only improves language skills, but also boosts confidence. The teacher listens carefully, encourages everyone, and gives feedback in a positive way. That is the hallmark of someone who truly understands how to teach effectively. Finally, I want to highlight lifelong learning. Great teachers never stop learning. They read, attend workshops, and explore new ways to teach. By doing this, they set an example for students. A teacher who is curious, open-minded, and continuously improving inspires students to adopt the same attitude. So, to summarize, what makes a good teacher? Knowledge, empathy, passion, communication, adaptability, humor, and a commitment to lifelong learning. But perhaps the most important quality of all is the ability to connect with students, make learning meaningful, and inspire growth. Now, let's dive deeper into the idea of teaching styles. Every teacher has a unique approach, and this greatly affects how students learn. Some teachers are authoritative, meaning they structure lessons very clearly, set high expectations, and maintain strict discipline. This style works well for students who thrive in an organized environment and appreciate clear guidelines. Imagine a mathematics teacher who plans every class meticulously. They outline objectives, assign specific exercises, and monitor progress regularly. Students know exactly what to expect, and this predictability can create a focused, efficient learning environment. However, if used exclusively, this style might feel rigid or intimidating for some learners. That's why balance is key. Then, there are facilitative teachers. These teachers guide students rather than dictate information. They encourage questions, discussions, and independent thinking. For example, in a literature class, instead of telling students what a poem means, a facilitative teacher might ask, "What do you think the poet is trying to convey here?" This method fosters critical thinking and allows students to explore ideas freely. Advanced learners especially benefit from this because it challenges them to analyze, evaluate, and articulate complex thoughts in English. Another common style is mentorship-oriented teaching. These teachers go beyond the curriculum and focus on students' overall growth. They mentor students in personal development, career planning, or learning strategies. Imagine a language teacher who notices that one student is shy during discussions. Instead of simply grading their participation, the teacher meets them individually, gives tips on confidence building, and provides exercises to practice speaking in a supportive setting. Over time, this personalized guidance helps the student not only improve academically, but also develop essential life skills. Now, let's consider some practical classroom examples that demonstrate what we've discussed so far. Picture a science lesson on ecosystems. A knowledgeable teacher might start by explaining the theory using diagrams and terminology. Then, to make it relatable, they take students outside for a mini field study. Students observe plants, insects, and soil quality firsthand. They take notes, ask questions, and discuss their observations. The teacher encourages them to make connections between theory and reality. This method combines expertise, empathy, adaptability, and interactive learning, all in one lesson. Another example could be in a language classroom. Think about a writing lesson where students are learning to express complex opinions. A teacher could start by showing examples of strong essays, highlighting structure, vocabulary, and cohesion. Then, they could organize small group discussions where students brainstorm ideas together. After that, students write their own essays while the teacher walks around, providing feedback, answering questions, and offering encouragement. Finally, they might hold a peer review session where students give constructive feedback to each other. This approach not only teaches technical skills, but also promotes collaboration, confidence, and communication. A good teacher also knows the importance of motivation. Students often encounter challenging topics, and without encouragement, they may feel frustrated or give up. For instance, consider a complex topic like quantum physics or advanced grammar structures. A skilled teacher breaks the topic into manageable parts, celebrates small achievements, and continually reminds students of their progress. They might say, "You're doing great. Remember when you couldn't explain this concept? Look at how much you've improved." Positive reinforcement like this fosters resilience and a growth mindset. Let's also talk about feedback. A good teacher gives feedback in a way that is specific, actionable, and constructive. For example, instead of saying, "Your essay is weak," a teacher might say, "Your introduction is strong," but the body paragraphs could use clearer examples. Try to connect your points more directly to your thesis. This kind of guidance helps students understand exactly what to improve and how. It encourages self-reflection, which is critical for advanced learners who are refining their skills and aiming for precision in English. Technology has become an essential tool for modern teaching. A teacher who embraces technology can significantly enhance learning. For instance, using apps for language learning, virtual labs for science, or interactive simulations for economics can make lessons more engaging and memorable. Imagine a history teacher using a virtual reality tour of ancient Rome. Students can explore the Colosseum, streets, and marketplaces as if they were actually there. This immersive experience not only makes the subject interesting, but also helps students retain information better. Technology, when used thoughtfully, adds a dynamic dimension to teaching that was impossible even a few years ago. We can't forget emotional intelligence. This is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage both the teacher's and students' emotions. In practice, this might mean noticing when a student feels anxious before a presentation and offering reassurance. Or it could involve a teacher sensing frustration in the classroom and adjusting the lesson pace to prevent students from feeling overwhelmed. Emotional intelligence allows teachers to build strong relationships with students, which enhances learning and creates a supportive classroom environment. Let's look at a real-world story to illustrate these ideas. I once read about a teacher in a language school who noticed that one student consistently avoided speaking in class. Instead of reprimanding the student, the teacher paired them with a supportive partner and introduced short, low-pressure speaking activities. Over several weeks, the students' confidence grew, and they started participating actively. Eventually, they even led a discussion in front of the class. This story shows the power of empathy, patience, adaptability, and encouragement. A good teacher doesn't just focus on grades. They focus on helping students grow, overcome fears, and achieve their potential. Another example involves mentorship. In universities, professors often guide students through research projects. A professor might give general advice at first, then gradually allow students to take more responsibility, offering guidance only when necessary. By the end of the project, students not only complete their research successfully, but also develop critical thinking, problem-solving, and independent learning skills. These are qualities that advanced learners can apply not only in academics, but also in their careers and everyday life. Let's talk briefly about continuous learning for teachers. Great teachers never stop being learners themselves. They read the latest research in education, attend workshops, and experiment with new teaching methods. This sets a powerful example for students. When students see their teacher actively learning and evolving, they understand that education is a lifelong journey. They learn to embrace curiosity, open-mindedness, and adaptability. This attitude is especially valuable at advanced levels of English learning, where students need to synthesize, analyze, and apply knowledge creatively. Finally, I want to touch on creativity in teaching. Creative teachers find innovative ways to explain ideas, engage students, and make lessons memorable. For example, a teacher might use storytelling, role play, or real-life case studies to demonstrate abstract concepts. Creativity makes lessons fun and encourages students to think outside the box. This is particularly important in language learning because it helps students use English naturally rather than just memorizing rules. So if we combine all these elements, knowledge, empathy, passion, communication, adaptability, humor, motivation, feedback, technology, emotional intelligence, mentorship, continuous learning, and creativity, we get a picture of what truly makes a good teacher. But perhaps the most important thing is the ability to connect with students on a human level and inspire them to reach their potential. Now that we've discussed the qualities of a good teacher, let's focus on how students can identify great teaching and maximize their learning. This is something every learner should pay attention to, especially at advanced levels like C1 or C2. Understanding what makes a teacher effective. can help students not only choose the right mentors, but also adopt strategies to learn independently and efficiently. First, observe how the teacher explains complex ideas. A good teacher can take a difficult concept and break it down into understandable pieces without oversimplifying. For example, imagine a linguistics class discussing phonetics. Some sounds in English, like the har and think, are difficult for non-native speakers. A skilled teacher doesn't just demonstrate the sound once, they provide multiple examples, explain mouth positioning, and offer exercises that gradually build mastery. If a student notices that a teacher consistently makes tough topics clear, that's a strong sign of effective teaching. Next, notice how the teacher engages with students. Are they asking questions, encouraging discussion, and valuing opinions? Engagement is crucial because it shows the teacher's commitment to active learning rather than passive instruction. For instance, in a business English class, a teacher might ask students to debate a real-world scenario, such as negotiating a contract. The teacher listens carefully, provides guidance, and highlights useful phrases or strategies. Students not only learn language, but also gain practical skills. This type of engagement reflects an understanding of advanced learners' needs, applying knowledge, thinking critically, and practicing communication skills in realistic contexts. Another key point is how feedback is given. Advanced learners need constructive and specific feedback. A good teacher doesn't simply correct mistakes. They explain why something is incorrect, suggest alternatives, and guide improvement. For example, in an essay writing lesson, rather than marking wrong, a teacher might say, "Your argument is strong, but your transitions between paragraphs could be smoother." Try using linking words like however, furthermore, or on the other hand. Observing how feedback is delivered can help students identify teachers who genuinely want to support their growth. Motivation and inspiration are other critical factors. A good teacher inspires curiosity and enthusiasm for learning. They celebrate achievements, however small, and create an environment where students feel confident to explore and experiment. For example, imagine a teacher who encourages students to give a short presentation in English on a topic they're passionate about. They provide tips beforehand, cheer them on during the presentation, and highlight what went well afterward. This process instills confidence, promotes active learning, and makes students feel valued. If you notice a teacher consistently motivates and inspires students, that's another hallmark of excellence. Let's consider the role of adaptability in advanced learning. Teachers who adapt lessons based on student needs demonstrate true professionalism. For instance, in an advanced English discussion class, students may have varying levels of vocabulary knowledge. A teacher who notices a student struggling with specific words might provide synonyms, use simpler phrases, or encourage peer explanations. At the same time, they challenge stronger students with complex tasks. This dynamic approach ensures that all students progress without feeling bored or overwhelmed. Adaptable teachers are sensitive to classroom dynamics and individual learning speeds, which is essential for advanced learners tackling nuanced language skills. Technology integration is also increasingly important. Teachers who use modern tools effectively can enhance comprehension and retention. For example, imagine a teacher explaining idioms in English. They could use videos, interactive apps, or real-world examples from social media to show how idioms are used naturally. Students can watch, listen, and practice in context, which is far more effective than memorizing definitions from a textbook. If a teacher combines technology with traditional teaching, students often find lessons more engaging, memorable, and enjoyable. Another aspect worth mentioning is the teacher's emotional intelligence and classroom atmosphere. A classroom where students feel safe, respected, and encouraged fosters learning far more effectively than one where fear of judgment dominates. For example, a teacher might notice that some students hesitate to answer questions. By offering encouragement, celebrating small successes, and avoiding harsh criticism, they create a supportive space where students feel comfortable taking risks. Advanced learners particularly benefit from such environments because they can focus on refining language skills, rather than worrying about mistakes. Now, let's talk about long-term mentorship and its impact on learning. Some of the best teachers extend their role beyond the classroom. They offer advice on study strategies, career choices, and personal development. For example, a teacher might notice a student struggling with writing fluency. Beyond regular lessons, they might recommend books, online resources, or even write personalized exercises to improve skills. Over time, students often look back and realize these small acts of mentorship had a profound effect on their growth. Here's an example that combines several of these qualities. A teacher running an advanced English debate club. They carefully select topics that challenge students intellectually, like ethical dilemmas, global politics, or scientific controversies. They explain complex ideas beforehand, provide vocabulary support, model persuasive arguments, and give feedback on both content and language. They adapt topics based on student interests, encourage peer learning, and integrate technology for research. The atmosphere is respectful, motivating, and dynamic. Students leave not just with improved English skills, but also with enhanced critical thinking, confidence, and problem-solving abilities. This scenario highlights what a good teacher can achieve when multiple qualities come together effectively. Another practical consideration is how teachers encourage independent learning. Advanced students need to take ownership of their education. Good teachers foster independence by guiding learners to develop strategies for self-study. For instance, a teacher might assign a reading task and ask students to summarize, analyze, and critique it in a discussion forum. Then, they provide feedback but allow students to reflect on their own progress. This empowers learners to identify gaps, make improvements, and internalize skills. Encouraging independence is especially valuable for students preparing for advanced exams or professional English use. Let's also reflect on the human element in teaching. Often, the difference between a good teacher and a great one is how they relate to students as people. Remember, education is not just about transferring knowledge, it's about connecting, inspiring, and guiding. Small gestures, like remembering a student's name, showing genuine interest in their progress, or sharing personal experiences, can create a lasting impact. Students who feel seen and valued are more likely to engage deeply, participate actively, and retain knowledge effectively. Finally, consider continuous improvement in teaching. Great teachers model the very skills they want students to develop: curiosity, perseverance, and growth mindset. They learn from each class, adapt methods, experiment with new techniques, and reflect on what worked or didn't. This approach sets an example for students, showing that learning never stops, even for experts. In advanced language learning, where mastery involves nuanced understanding and application, observing a teacher's dedication to self-improvement can be incredibly inspiring. Now, let's take a closer look at how famous educators and teaching innovators have influenced the idea of what makes a good teacher. Studying their methods can give us valuable lessons about effective teaching. Take Maria Montessori, for example. She emphasized student-centered learning, where the role of the teacher is to observe, guide, and create an environment in which students can explore independently. Montessori classrooms are structured but flexible, allowing students to choose activities that interest them while developing skills at their own pace. This approach illustrates that a good teacher isn't necessarily the loudest or most authoritative person in the room. They're the one who facilitates growth and fosters curiosity. Another example is John Dewey, a key figure in progressive education. Dewey believed that learning should be active and experiential, rather than just memorization. He encouraged teachers to connect lessons to real-life situations and societal problems. For instance, a teacher following Dewey's philosophy might teach economics by having students create a mini-business project, or teach environmental science by organizing a local community cleanup. This method teaches not only the subject matter, but also critical thinking, teamwork, and problem solving, skills essential for advanced learners. Now, what about modern teaching practices? Let's consider technology-enhanced classrooms. Some innovative teachers use blended learning, combining in-person instruction with online platforms. For example, an advanced English teacher might assign podcasts, news articles, or TED Talks for listening practice, then use classroom time for discussion and analysis. This approach allows students to absorb information at their own pace while still benefiting from real-time guidance. The teacher monitors progress, answers questions, and encourages deeper exploration. This balance of independence and support reflects many of the qualities we've discussed: adaptability, empathy, and continuous improvement. Let's explore practical strategies students can adopt to maximize learning from good teachers. First, active listening is essential. Don't just passively hear the teacher. Engage with their ideas. Take notes not only of facts, but also of methods, examples, and explanations. For instance, if a teacher explains a grammar structure using storytelling, note both the rule and the example. Later, you can try to recreate similar examples in your own words. This practice helps advanced learners internalize complex structures and think in English more naturally. Second, ask questions. Good teachers welcome curiosity. If you're unsure about something, don't hesitate to clarify. Even better, formulate questions that go beyond the basics. For example, instead of asking, "What does this word mean?" you could ask, "Can you give an example of how this word might be used in professional settings?" This approach shows initiative and encourages teachers to provide deeper, more meaningful explanations. Third, observe teaching techniques. As you listen, pay attention to how the teacher introduces topics, transitions between ideas, and engages students. Are they using examples from daily life? Do they connect new information to prior knowledge? Are they encouraging collaboration? By studying these methods, advanced learners can not only improve their own understanding, but also adopt some of these strategies if they ever become teachers themselves. Now, let's talk about learning from mistakes. Both as a student and a teacher, advanced learning is full of challenges, and a key quality of good teachers is how they handle errors. Imagine a student giving a presentation in English and making several grammatical mistakes. A supportive teacher will focus first on the strengths of the presentation, then highlight areas for improvement with clear, constructive guidance. This approach helps students view mistakes as opportunities rather than failures. As a student, notice how your teacher addresses errors. This can teach you how to handle challenges constructively in your own learning process. Another aspect of effective learning is reflection. Good teachers often encourage students to reflect on their own performance, think critically about what they've learned, and plan how to improve. For instance, after a writing assignment, a teacher might ask students to review their work, identify strengths and weaknesses, and set goals for the next piece. This reflective process not only reinforces learning, but also builds independence, which is crucial for advanced learners aiming to refine language skills and critical thinking abilities. Let's explore some daily life scenarios where the qualities of good teachers are evident. Imagine a student struggling to understand phrasal verbs in English, a common challenge for advanced learners. A skilled teacher might explain one verb in multiple contexts, provide real-life examples, and design small exercises for practice. Then, they might check understanding by encouraging students to create their own sentences and share them in class. This multi-step approach demonstrates empathy, patience, adaptability, and interactive teaching. The student feels supported, motivated, and capable of learning complex language features. Another example is group discussions in advanced English classrooms. A teacher might divide students into small teams to debate ethical dilemmas, current events, or cultural differences. Each student gets a chance to speak, and the teacher provides guidance, corrects mistakes subtly, and encourages nuanced arguments. This type of lesson develops fluency, critical thinking, and confidence. It also highlights several qualities of a good teacher: engagement, communication skills, empathy, and the ability to motivate learners. Now, let's discuss the importance of teacher-student relationships in depth. A strong, respectful relationship between teacher and student creates a safe environment for learning. When students feel that their ideas are valued, they are more likely to participate actively and take risks in learning. For example, in a creative writing class, A student may feel nervous sharing a short story. A teacher who shows genuine interest, asks thoughtful questions, and gives encouraging feedback can make a huge difference. This environment fosters not just skill development, but also emotional growth, resilience, and confidence, qualities essential for advanced learners. We can also look at mentorship beyond academics. Great teachers often guide students in developing habits, strategies, and skills for life, not just for exams. For instance, a language teacher might provide advice on managing study schedules, selecting reading materials, or practicing speaking outside the classroom. These small, practical tips often have a... Let's consider creativity and innovation in lessons. A creative teacher can make abstract concepts tangible. For example, when teaching idiomatic expressions, a teacher might organize role plays, storytelling exercises, or interactive games. Instead of memorizing definitions, students experience the idioms in context. This not only makes lessons more engaging, but also helps advanced learners understand nuance, tone, and cultural context, skills that are critical at C1, C2 levels. Finally, consider lifelong learning and role modeling. The best teachers model the behaviors they want their students to adopt. They read, explore new ideas, and continuously improve their teaching methods. By observing this, students understand that learning never ends, that curiosity is valuable, and that effort and perseverance lead to mastery. For advanced learners, seeing a teacher actively engage in learning reinforces the idea that mastery of English, or any skill, requires ongoing practice, reflection, and openness to new knowledge. Now, let's move into practical strategies students can use to learn from good teachers, and how to internalize the qualities of effective teaching in their own lives. Understanding what makes a teacher great is one thing, but actively applying those lessons can take your learning to an entirely new level. First, advanced learners should focus on observation and analysis. Pay attention to how teachers structure their lessons. Notice how they transition between topics, how they introduce examples, and how they maintain student engagement. For instance, a teacher explaining a complex topic in economics might start with a real-world case study, then introduce theory, and finally facilitate a discussion to connect ideas. By observing this flow, you learn not only the subject matter, but also methods for organizing information clearly, a skill you can apply in presentations, essays, or professional contexts. Second, emulate communication techniques. Advanced learners can improve their English by noticing the way teachers phrase sentences, emphasize ideas, and modulate tone. For example, a teacher might say, "It's essential to understand this principle because it affects everything we'll discuss later." By emphasizing keywords and connecting concepts, they make information memorable. As a learner, you can try to mimic these patterns in your own speaking and writing, which improves clarity, coherence, and persuasive skills. Another critical strategy is active participation. Simply listening isn't enough. Engage with the material by asking questions, contributing to discussions, and even challenging ideas respectfully. For example, in a literature class, if a teacher presents an interpretation of a poem, advanced learners might respond with alternative readings, or relate it to cultural or historical context. This type of engagement deepens understanding and encourages critical thinking. The teacher's response can provide additional layers of insight, and the interaction helps solidify your command of advanced English vocabulary and structures. Next, focus on reflective learning. After each lesson, take time to review what you've learned. Identify what was clear, what was challenging, and how you can improve. For instance, after a lesson on advanced idioms, you might reflect, "I understood most idioms, but I struggled to use them in sentences spontaneously. Tomorrow, I will write 5 original sentences using each idiom." Reflection allows advanced learners to track progress, recognize patterns in their learning, and plan targeted improvements. Let's explore examples from daily life and classroom scenarios. Imagine an advanced English class discussing global environmental issues. The teacher presents recent research, encourages debate, and guides students in developing arguments. A student notices that the teacher uses a strategy of asking probing questions, connecting abstract ideas to current events. By observing this, the student learns not only about the environment, but also how to structure arguments logically, use persuasive language, and respond effectively in discussions. This is learning beyond content. It's learning method. Another strategy is taking initiative outside the classroom. Great teachers often provide resources, suggestions, or exercises for independent learning. Advanced learners can benefit by following these recommendations diligently. For example, a teacher might suggest watching English language documentaries, reading editorials, or participating in discussion forums online. By actively engaging with these resources, students reinforce classroom learning and expand vocabulary, comprehension, and cultural understanding in authentic contexts. We can also discuss how to learn from feedback effectively. Feedback is a cornerstone of advanced learning, and good teachers know how to provide it constructively. When receiving feedback, focus not on criticism, but on actionable advice. For instance, if a teacher comments, "Your essay is strong, but your arguments need more evidence," break it down. Identify which parts need support. Research or brainstorm additional examples, and revise carefully. Advanced learners who internalize feedback develop a mindset of continuous improvement rather than perfectionism, which is crucial for mastering complex skills. Let's examine mentorship and long-term guidance. Some of the most valuable lessons from teachers come outside formal lessons. For example, a teacher noticing a student's interest in international relations might suggest additional reading, invite them to join discussion groups, or provide guidance on pursuing related internships. Advanced learners benefit enormously from such mentorship because it connects classroom knowledge to real-life applications, encourages exploration, and builds confidence. Observing and participating in these interactions teaches professional skills, research strategies, and critical thinking, skills beyond language alone. Now, let's consider how teachers inspire curiosity and creativity. A good teacher doesn't just provide answers, they provoke questions. Imagine a history teacher presenting an event like the Industrial Revolution. Rather than simply stating facts, they ask students, "How do you think the rapid technological changes affected workers' daily lives? What lessons can we apply to today's world?" By encouraging students to think critically, make connections, and express opinions, teachers foster curiosity, analytical skills, and creativity. Advanced learners gain the dual benefit of improving language proficiency and cultivating intellectual flexibility. Collaboration and peer learning are also key aspects of effective teaching. Teachers often organize group projects, debates, or peer reviews. For example, in a business English course, students might work in teams to develop a marketing plan. The teacher observes, provides guidance, and encourages reflection. Students not only practice advanced vocabulary and presentation skills, but also learn teamwork, negotiation, and problem solving. By noticing how a teacher facilitates collaboration, learners can replicate similar strategies in study groups or professional settings, enhancing both language and interpersonal skills. Let's look at examples from modern classrooms using technology. A science teacher might use interactive simulations to demonstrate chemical reactions. A language teacher could assign listening tasks using podcasts, videos, or speech recognition software to practice pronunciation. A literature teacher might use online forums for debates about themes in novels. In each case, the teacher combines technological tools with personal guidance, creating a dynamic learning environment. Advanced learners benefit by engaging in multimodal learning, which strengthens listening, comprehension, writing, and speaking simultaneously. We should also reflect on emotional intelligence in teaching and learning. Advanced learners often encounter challenging topics, like abstract philosophical concepts or technical jargon. A teacher who recognizes student frustration and responds with patience, encouragement, and clarity can transform confusion into understanding. For example, a teacher noticing hesitation in speaking exercises might provide scaffolding, modeling sentences, giving vocabulary prompts, or pairing the student with a supportive partner. Emotional intelligence ensures that learning is not just cognitive, but also motivational and psychologically safe. Let's consider creativity in advanced language classes. Teachers often introduce playful exercises, storytelling, role-playing, or debates to make lessons memorable. For instance, teaching phrasal verbs might involve a storytelling game where students create a narrative using a set of verbs. This type of activity encourages active use of language, reinforces memory, and develops confidence in speaking and writing. Advanced learners who pay attention to these strategies can adapt them for self-study or peer practice, making learning more dynamic and enjoyable. Finally, let's examine the role of continuous learning for teachers and students. The best teachers model curiosity, adaptability, and a growth mindset. They experiment with new methods, integrate technology, and learn from student feedback. Observing this, students internalize the value of lifelong learning. At advanced levels, this is crucial. Language mastery requires ongoing practice, critical thinking, and refinement. Students who emulate these behaviors are better equipped for academic, professional, and personal success. Now, let's explore how learners can actively apply the qualities of good teachers in their own learning routines. Advanced students, in particular, benefit from understanding not just what teachers do, but how they can emulate these strategies to become more effective, self-directed learners. This approach is powerful because it transforms observation into action, turning passive listening into active skill development. First, consider structured planning. Good teachers are always organized. They plan lessons with clear objectives, steps, and outcomes. Learners can adopt this approach by creating structured study plans. For example, if you're learning advanced English grammar, you might divide topics into weekly goals, such as mastering complex sentence structures, idiomatic expressions, and formal writing techniques. Within each week, plan specific activities: reading articles, writing summaries, practicing speaking, and reviewing feedback. This mirrors the teacher's methodical approach, helping you stay focused and track progress effectively. Next, focus on breaking down complex concepts into manageable parts. Teachers excel at making difficult ideas digestible. Learners can adopt this technique by analyzing challenging material themselves. For instance, if you encounter a dense academic article, don't try to understand everything at once. Break it down paragraph by paragraph. Highlight key ideas, summarize them in your own words, and identify vocabulary or structures you don't yet understand. This step-by-step approach mirrors what a good teacher does in class and ensures comprehension without feeling overwhelmed. Another strategy is active note-taking and reflection. Good teachers often model how to organize information clearly. You can apply this by keeping a dedicated learning journal. When listening to lessons, podcasts, or reading materials, note not only content but also methods, examples, and structures used. For instance, if a teacher uses a metaphor to explain a complex economic principle, write down the metaphor and your own interpretation. Later, review these notes, reflect on what you've learned, and test yourself by explaining the concept aloud or teaching it to someone else. This process reinforces memory and builds advanced communication skills. Now, let's discuss the importance of active participation. In class, students who ask questions, contribute ideas, and respond thoughtfully often learn more. You can replicate this even when studying independently. For example, after reading a news article in English, challenge yourself with reflective questions. What is the author's main argument? Do I agree or disagree? How would I explain this idea to someone else? Answering these questions aloud or in writing strengthens both comprehension and expressive skills. This method mirrors classroom discussion and fosters analytical thinking. Emulating feedback techniques is another advanced strategy. Reflect on how teachers provide constructive criticism. Good teachers don't just correct, they guide, suggest alternatives, and highlight improvement strategies. You can adopt this by reviewing your own work critically. For instance, after writing an essay, read it carefully and ask, where are the strengths? Where is clarity lacking? Could I use more precise vocabulary or advanced sentence structures? Then revise accordingly. This self-feedback method mirrors a teacher's approach and encourages continuous improvement, a hallmark of advanced learning. Let's consider peer collaboration and mentorship. Teachers often facilitate group work to enhance learning. You can replicate this by forming study groups or language exchanges. For example, pair up with another learner to discuss articles, practice debates, or give each other feedback on writing. Observe how teachers encourage collaboration, sharing ideas, listening actively, and providing constructive criticism, and try to emulate these behaviors in peer interactions. This not only reinforces language skills, but also cultivates social intelligence, leadership, and problem-solving abilities. Now, let's discuss integrating creativity into learning. Advanced teachers often use storytelling, role play, or interactive exercises to make lessons memorable. Learners can do the same independently. For instance, practice new vocabulary by creating short stories, recording yourself explaining complex topics, or performing role plays based on real-life scenarios. This method engages multiple senses, strengthens recall, and improves fluency in speaking and writing. Creativity also allows learners to experiment with language in authentic contexts, which is vital for mastery at C1, C2 levels. Time management is another essential skill learners can adopt from effective teachers. Good teachers allocate time wisely, balancing explanation, practice, and review. Advanced learners should do the same in self-study. For example, during a study session, allocate time for reading, note-taking, practice exercises, and reflection. Use timers or schedules to ensure that each activity receives adequate attention. Structured time management enhances efficiency, ensures comprehensive coverage, and mirrors the disciplined approach of professional educators. Let's explore real-world scenarios where these strategies apply. Imagine preparing for an advanced English exam. A teacher might guide students through listening, reading, writing, and speaking tasks sequentially, providing feedback at each stage. As a learner, you can replicate this method. Select practice tests, complete tasks methodically, analyze results, and revise based on feedback. Notice patterns, identify weak points, and gradually build mastery. This mirrors classroom learning and ensures active, focused practice. Another example involves language immersion and application. Teachers often encourage students to use English outside the classroom. You can adopt this by incorporating English into daily routines, listening to podcasts, reading news articles, writing reflections, or speaking with peers. For instance, after watching an English language documentary, summarize the main points in writing or discuss them aloud. This continuous exposure reinforces vocabulary, comprehension, and advanced grammar usage. Effective teachers create immersive environments. You can replicate this independently to accelerate learning. Reflective journaling is a particularly effective technique for advanced learners. Write about what you've learned, challenges faced, and strategies to improve. For instance, after practicing advanced listening skills, note which words or phrases were difficult to understand, strategies that helped, and areas for future focus. This mirrors how teachers encourage reflection in class and build self-awareness, metacognitive skills, and long-term retention. Now, let's consider emotional and motivational strategies inspired by good teachers. Teachers often encourage a growth mindset, showing that mistakes are part of learning. As a learner, adopt this mentality. When struggling with complex grammar, difficult listening passages, or speaking fluency, remind yourself that errors are learning opportunities. Track progress over time, celebrate small successes, and maintain persistence. This attitude mirrors the supportive guidance of a great teacher and fosters resilience and confidence at advanced levels. We can also examine adaptive learning strategies. Great teachers notice individual student needs and adjust lessons accordingly. You can do the same by identifying personal strengths and weaknesses. For instance, if you excel in reading comprehension but struggle with spoken English, allocate more time to listening and speaking activities while maintaining balanced practice across all skills. This self-awareness and adaptability reflect professional teaching strategies and enhance learning efficiency. Finally, let's discuss long-term benefits of learning from good teachers. Observing, emulating, and reflecting on teaching methods develops not only language skills, but also critical thinking, creativity, problem-solving, and independent learning. Advanced learners who internalize these strategies become not only proficient in English, but also capable of analyzing complex ideas, communicating effectively, and applying knowledge in real-life situations. Now, let's explore detailed stories of exceptional teaching moments and how learners can draw lessons from them. Stories help advanced learners understand abstract ideas in context, reinforce vocabulary, and demonstrate practical application of strategies. Consider the story of a university professor teaching advanced English literature. She noticed that her students struggled to interpret symbolism in classic novels. Rather than giving direct explanations, she devised a creative exercise. Each student selected a chapter and drew a mind map connecting characters, themes, and symbolic elements. Then they presented their interpretations to the class. The professor guided discussions, asked probing questions, and highlighted subtle nuances in symbolism. Over time, students developed deeper analytical skills and could articulate complex ideas fluently in English. From this, learners can see the power of interactive engagement, creativity, and scaffolded guidance, all hallmarks of effective teaching. Another story comes from a science teacher in an advanced ESL classroom. The topic was climate change, a complex subject with technical terminology and abstract concepts. Instead of overwhelming students with data, the teacher organized a simulated climate summit. Students assumed roles: scientists, policymakers, journalists, and prepared arguments based on research. The teacher facilitated debates, corrected misunderstandings subtly, and encouraged use of precise vocabulary. This approach demonstrates experiential learning, role-playing, and contextualized practice, key strategies that advanced learners can replicate in their own studies. For instance, students could create debates or discussions on professional or personal topics, practicing both language skills and critical thinking. Let's also examine a story from a language immersion context. An English teacher organized weekly immersion days, where students could only communicate in English. The teacher prepared real-life scenarios, ordering food, asking for directions, presenting business plans, and casual conversations. Students initially felt nervous, but the teacher's patient guidance, positive reinforcement, and structured exercises created a safe environment for experimentation. Over months, students gained fluency, confidence, and practical vocabulary. Advanced learners can emulate this by creating simulated immersion environments at home, practicing speaking, listening, and writing in realistic contexts daily. Now, let's discuss how advanced learners can adopt mentorship-style learning. Great teachers often serve as mentors, guiding students beyond formal lessons. Take a story of a mentor who helped a student struggling with professional communication in English. The mentor observed the student's presentations, suggested targeted exercises, and provided ongoing feedback. Gradually, the student's confidence and fluency improved significantly. Advanced learners can replicate this by seeking peer or online mentorship, analyzing model performances, and practicing structured feedback loops. This mirrors professional teaching strategies and enhances both linguistic and cognitive skills. Storytelling as a teaching tool is also worth highlighting. Many outstanding teachers use stories to make abstract concepts tangible. For instance, a history teacher explaining industrialization might recount the life of a fictional worker living in 19th century London. Students visualize the environment, empathize with challenges, and analyze the social and economic context. Advanced learners benefit because stories engage memory, comprehension, and critical thinking simultaneously. They can also use storytelling themselves to practice complex vocabulary, advanced grammar, and persuasive communication. Now, let's focus on practical techniques to internalize teacher-inspired strategies. Advanced learners can create a structured observation journal. Here's how. Whenever you attend a lecture, watch a podcast, or participate in an online lesson, note the following. Lesson structure. How does the teacher organize information? Engagement methods. What strategies keep students interested? Explanation techniques. How are complex ideas clarified? Feedback approaches. How is guidance delivered constructively? Motivational strategies. How are students encouraged? Adaptability and problem solving. How does the teacher handle challenges? By reflecting on these points, learners can internalize effective strategies and apply them in self-study or peer teaching contexts. For example, you could replicate engagement techniques by creating discussion prompts for yourself or practicing explanations aloud as if teaching someone else. Let's look at collaborative learning inspired by teachers. In advanced classrooms, students often work in pairs or groups, with teachers guiding discussions. Learners can replicate this by forming study groups, participating in online forums, or joining language exchange programs. For example, after reading a complex article on technology trends, students could discuss key points in a small group, ask questions, and provide feedback. This mirrors classroom dynamics, reinforces comprehension, and develops advanced speaking and reasoning skills. Incorporating technology for learning is another teacher-inspired strategy. Many advanced educators integrate apps, videos, podcasts, and interactive simulations into lessons. Learners can do the same. Use speech recognition software to improve pronunciation, analyze podcasts for idioms and advanced structures, or participate in virtual discussion boards. By combining self-directed learning with technological tools, students replicate the interactive and engaging environment of high-quality classrooms. We should also consider reflection and self-assessment, key techniques used by top teachers. For example, after completing a listening exercise, note which parts were difficult, what strategies helped, and what you could do differently next time. After writing an essay, evaluate clarity, vocabulary, and grammar. Over time, this reflective practice fosters independence, critical thinking, and continuous improvement. Advanced learners who adopt this habit often progress faster than those who rely solely on instruction. Now, let's discuss emotional intelligence and motivation, drawing inspiration from exceptional teachers. Great educators recognize the emotional and psychological aspects of learning. They know when students are overwhelmed, frustrated, or lacking confidence, and they respond with patience and encouragement. Advanced learners can adopt a similar mindset for themselves. When encountering challenges, maintain a growth-oriented perspective, celebrate small achievements, and develop strategies to overcome obstacles. This approach strengthens resilience, confidence, and long-term mastery of English. Creativity in learning is another important takeaway. Teachers often use innovative exercises to make lessons memorable. For instance, a vocabulary lesson could involve creating a mini-story, role-playing a scenario, or producing a short video using new words. Advanced learners can replicate these exercises independently or with peers, which enhances retention, fluency, and flexibility in using complex language structures. Creativity also encourages learners to experiment, make mistakes safely, and discover unique ways to express themselves. Finally, let's explore continuous learning and adaptability, key qualities demonstrated by exceptional teachers. Great teachers continually refine their methods, experiment with new ideas, and incorporate feedback. Advanced learners should mirror this by remaining curious, experimenting with study techniques, and adapting strategies to suit their evolving needs. For example, if a particular listening strategy isn't effective, try an alternative approach. perhaps shadowing audio, summarizing podcasts, or creating discussion questions. Over time, this iterative approach leads to mastery and deep understanding. Now, let's explore daily routines inspired by the strategies of exceptional teachers. Advanced learners often need structured habits that combine consistency, creativity, and reflection. By observing what makes teachers effective, you can design your own study schedule to optimize learning. Morning routines are particularly powerful. Many successful teachers start the day by reviewing lesson plans or reading new materials. Learners can emulate this by dedicating the first 30 to 60 minutes of the day to focused English practice. For instance, listen to a short podcast segment, write a brief summary, and note new vocabulary or complex sentence structures. This not only develops listening comprehension, but also reinforces active learning skills. Additionally, morning practice primes your brain for deeper cognitive work throughout the day, much like teachers mentally prepare before instructing. Next, consider immersive listening exercises. One story comes from an advanced learner who dedicated 2 hours daily to listening to English content, podcasts, TED Talks, news segments, and audiobooks. Each time they paused to summarize the main idea, identify advanced vocabulary, and note idiomatic expressions. This mimicked how a good teacher structures listening exercises, pre-listening preparation, guided engagement, and post-listening reflection. Over months, the learner's comprehension, speed of processing, and note-taking skills improved dramatically. Advanced learners can replicate this by creating personalized listening routines that challenge comprehension while reinforcing retention. Speaking routines are equally important. Exceptional teachers create opportunities for students to speak in low-pressure environments. You can replicate this by forming a daily speaking practice habit. For instance, set a goal to explain a news article aloud, debate a topic with a language partner, or record yourself summarizing a complex concept. Reflect on your use of advanced structures, vocabulary, and pronunciation, much like a teacher would provide feedback in class. Over time, this develops fluency, accuracy, and confidence in real-life communication. Now, let's discuss structured writing routines. Teachers often guide students through step-by-step writing exercises, brainstorming, drafting, revising, and editing. Advanced learners can adopt the same method independently. For example, after reading an article on environmental policy, you might summarize the main arguments, analyze the author's reasoning and style, write your response using complex structures and advanced vocabulary, revise critically, focusing on coherence, grammar, and nuance. By repeating this process regularly, learners develop high-level writing skills similar to what teachers cultivate in classrooms, but in a self-directed manner. Let's explore reflection and feedback routines. Teachers emphasize reviewing mistakes, identifying patterns, and setting improvement goals. Advanced learners can implement a weekly reflection journal. At the end of each week, review exercises completed, listening notes taken, or speaking recordings. Ask yourself, which skills improved? Where did I struggle? What strategies worked best? What will I focus on next week? This mirrors the reflective habits modeled by excellent teachers and fosters metacognitive skills, independence, and long-term progress. Immersive reading routines are another teacher-inspired strategy. Exceptional teachers select materials that are challenging but meaningful. Advanced learners can replicate this by reading a variety of content, editorials, research articles, literature, or professional reports. After reading, summarize the text, highlight new vocabulary, and critically evaluate arguments. For example, after reading an article on global economics, try explaining it aloud to a peer or recording a spoken summary. This approach mirrors classroom discussions and enhances comprehension, vocabulary, and critical thinking simultaneously. Let's explore role-play and simulation exercises. Some of the most effective teachers use interactive exercises to make abstract concepts concrete. Advanced learners can create their own simulations, conduct a mock business meeting in English, role-play a debate on a current political issue, Simulate a customer service scenario or negotiation. During these exercises, focus on applying advanced vocabulary, formal expressions, and nuanced arguments. Afterwards, reflect critically. Did I express ideas clearly? Was my vocabulary precise? How could I improve my persuasion or fluency? These self-guided exercises mirror high-level classroom strategies and reinforce practical English skills. Integrating feedback loops is also crucial. Teachers often give immediate or delayed feedback to guide improvement. Advanced learners can emulate this by recording speaking exercises or essays, then reviewing them after a day or two. Note errors, identify patterns, and implement corrections in the next session. This approach strengthens memory, accuracy, and awareness of recurring mistakes. Now, let's examine cultural and contextual learning, inspired by exceptional teaching. Good teachers connect language to culture, context, and real-life application. Advanced learners can do the same by exploring authentic English media, interviews, documentaries, TV shows, and podcasts. For instance, listening to a debate on climate policy exposes learners to advanced structures, persuasive language, and culturally specific expressions. Reflect on tone, register, and stylistic choices, and try to incorporate these elements into your own writing or speaking. This approach mirrors the immersive, contextualized strategies of skilled teachers. Peer collaboration routines are another effective technique. Teachers often structure group work to reinforce comprehension and speaking skills. Learners can replicate this by creating small study groups, discussion clubs, or online partnerships. For example, after reading a challenging article, discuss the key ideas, ask questions, and critique each other's interpretations. Encourage use of complex vocabulary and nuanced expressions. This collaborative routine mirrors effective classroom environments and accelerates fluency and comprehension. Let's explore error correction and adaptive strategies. Good teachers identify weaknesses and adapt instruction accordingly. Advanced learners can do the same for themselves. After a week of listening practice, identify recurring difficulties. Unclear comprehension of fast speech, misinterpretation of idioms, or grammatical errors in speaking. Then adapt practice. Slow down audio. Focus on idiomatic expressions or complete targeted grammar exercises. This self-adaptive approach mirrors professional teaching techniques and enhances efficiency and mastery. Incorporating creativity and engagement is another critical routine. Teachers often use games, simulations, or storytelling to make lessons memorable. Advanced learners can replicate this by gamifying their study. Turn vocabulary review into quizzes or flashcard challenges. Create mini-stories or dialogues using new structures. Record audio or video summaries to reinforce comprehension and speaking skills. Creativity ensures learning is enjoyable, memorable, and practical. It also encourages experimentation, allowing learners to take risks with language in a safe environment, just like a skilled teacher does in class. Finally, consider long-term consistency and mindset. Great teachers model dedication, persistence, and growth-oriented thinking. Advanced learners should mirror this mindset. Regular practice, reflection, and iterative improvement. Over months and years, these routines, listening, speaking, writing, reflecting, and creatively applying knowledge, accumulate into fluency, confidence, and mastery. By observing and emulating teacher strategies in daily practice, learners create a personalized, high-quality learning environment anywhere in the world. Now, let's focus on immersive listening exercises inspired by classroom strategies. Advanced teachers often use authentic materials to expose students to natural language, complex structures, and cultural nuances. Learners can replicate this at home by selecting podcasts, interviews, news segments, or TED Talks. Here's a structured approach. Pre-listening preparation. Before listening, skim the title, description, or transcript, if available, to anticipate content. Note any unfamiliar vocabulary or structures. For example, if the podcast is about climate policy, List key terms like carbon offset, renewable energy, or emissions trading. This mirrors how teachers prime students for comprehension. Active listening. While listening, focus on main ideas, tone, and key details. Pause when necessary to summarize in your own words. For instance, after a complex sentence about international agreements, repeat it aloud, paraphrase, or write a short summary. Advanced teachers often pause to ask questions or elicit responses. Learners can do the same by self-questioning. What is the speaker's main point? What examples were used? Post-listening reflection. After listening, summarize the content, highlight new vocabulary, and analyze stylistic choices. Advanced learners should also note discourse markers, connectors, and sentence structures. For example, notice phrases like, "it's worth noting," "on the contrary," or "as a result," which signal logical relationships. This step mirrors classroom review and reinforces comprehension and expression. Let's move on to speaking practice, inspired by teaching methods. Teachers often create opportunities for students to express ideas, debate, and present arguments. Learners can replicate this through self-guided exercises or peer interactions. Debates. Choose a topic relevant to your interests or current events. Prepare arguments, counter-arguments, and supporting evidence. Speak aloud for 5 to 10 minutes, then record yourself. Listen carefully, identify errors, and refine your language. This mirrors classroom debate exercises and develops advanced vocabulary, fluency, and critical thinking. Storytelling exercises. Take a news article, scientific discovery, or personal experience and explain it as a story. Focus on coherence, sequencing, and rich descriptive language. For instance, narrate a technological breakthrough, including its impact on society, challenges, and future potential. Teachers use storytelling to make abstract concepts tangible. Learners can do the same to practice expressive, advanced English. Role-playing scenarios. Teachers often use simulations to build practical communication skills. You can replicate this by imagining situations such as negotiating a contract, giving a professional presentation, attending an interview, or resolving a conflict. Record yourself, analyze language, and repeat with improvements. Advanced learners gain not only fluency, but also situational vocabulary and pragmatic competence. Now, let's explore vocabulary acquisition inspired by teachers. Good teachers don't just present words. They contextualize, explain nuance, and encourage active use. Learners can replicate this. Identify new words in context while reading or listening. Write example sentences, ideally related to your life or interests. Use spaced repetition systems, SRS, to review vocabulary regularly. Practice speaking or writing using new words within meaningful contexts. For example, learning the phrase "to bridge the gap" is more effective if you create a sentence. The project aims to bridge the gap between theory and practice in engineering education. This method mirrors advanced classroom strategies and ensures deeper understanding. Let's now examine advanced grammar and stylistic exercises. Teachers often emphasize clarity, variety, and sophistication in expression. Advanced learners can practice the following: complex sentence construction. Take a simple sentence and expand it with relative clauses, participial phrases, or conditional statements. For example, the teacher explained the lesson could become, the teacher, who had spent years developing innovative methods, explained the lesson in a way that made complex ideas accessible to all students. Formal versus informal register. Listen to spoken English in both professional contexts, lectures, interviews, and informal contexts, podcasts, casual conversations. Practice adjusting tone, vocabulary, and syntax depending on the audience. Teachers often model this adaptability. Learners benefit by consciously practicing it. Discourse markers and cohesion. Teachers emphasize logical flow in speaking and writing. Advanced learners can practice connecting ideas with phrases like "moreover," "on the other hand," "despite this," or "consequently." For instance, when explaining a news article, structure your summary: main point, supporting evidence, counterpoint, conclusion. Now, let's discuss listening for intonation in speech. For example, a speaker might emphasize must to indicate obligation or urgency, which changes the meaning of the sentence. Advanced learners should practice identifying these cues in podcasts, lectures, and conversations. Listening for implied ideas. Many advanced materials do not state facts directly. They suggest, hint, or imply. For instance, a speaker might say, some countries have invested heavily in renewable energy, implying progress or success without explicitly stating it. Pause and reflect. What is the speaker really suggesting? This mirrors how teachers train students to read between the lines. Noticing stylistic choices. Advanced teachers often highlight figurative language, humor, or rhetorical devices. Learners can pick out metaphors, idioms, or persuasive phrasing in materials and practice using them in speaking or writing. For example, if a speaker says, "The economy is a ticking time bomb," identify the metaphor, understand the urgency implied, and create your own sentence using a similar style. Let's continue with story-based immersion exercises. Storytelling is one of the most effective strategies used by exceptional teachers to engage learners and build contextual understanding. Learners can replicate this by creating detailed narratives around real-life events or fictional scenarios. For instance, imagine you are explaining a major technological innovation to a friend. Construct a story. Include the problem, the innovation, challenges faced, and implications for society. Speak or write it using advanced vocabulary, varied sentence structures, and logical sequencing. Reflect afterward. Did I clearly convey cause and effect? Did I use precise vocabulary? Could I improve cohesion? This mirrors classroom storytelling exercises and strengthens both comprehension and expressive abilities. Next, we can focus on interactive self-assessment exercises. Great teachers regularly assess comprehension, critical thinking, and application. Advanced learners can adopt this through quizzes. After reading or listening, create questions for yourself. For instance, after a podcast on climate change policy, ask, what were the main policy proposals? Which challenges were highlighted? How could I explain this to a colleague? Answering these questions strengthens retention and comprehension. Peer review. Collaborate with another advanced learner to provide feedback on speaking or writing exercises. Teachers often structure peer review to improve understanding and analytical skills. Learners can replicate this by exchanging recordings, essays, or summaries, and giving detailed feedback on vocabulary, grammar, and argumentation. Progress tracking. Teachers emphasize long-term growth. Advanced learners should track performance weekly, note improvements in listening comprehension, speaking fluency, vocabulary retention, and writing sophistication. Reflection and goal-setting mirror, teacher-guided evaluation, and foster autonomy. Now, let's discuss practical application in everyday life, one of the hallmarks of outstanding teaching. Advanced teachers encourage learners to apply knowledge outside the classroom. Learners can do the same. Professional contexts, practice presentations, write reports, or engage in discussions in English at work. For instance, prepare a summary of a business article and present it to colleagues or friends, focusing on clarity, fluency, and formal language. Casual contexts. Engage in conversation clubs, online forums, or social events. Practice expressing opinions, debating, and narrating personal experiences. Teachers often emphasize authentic usage. Learners benefit by creating immersive experiences. Media integration. Watch documentaries, listen to podcasts, or read advanced articles daily. Reflect on style, vocabulary, and argumentation. Practice summarizing or discussing content aloud, mimicking teacher strategies for reinforcement. Let's also explore emotional engagement and motivation, another essential teacher-inspired approach. Teachers know that motivation drives learning. Learners can adopt these strategies, set specific, measurable, and challenging goals. Like, I will summarize 2 advanced podcasts daily. Or, I will write a 300-word argumentative essay 3 times a week. Reward yourself for progress, reflection, small celebrations, or sharing achievements with peers. Maintain curiosity and growth mindset. View mistakes as opportunities to improve rather than failures. This mirrors teacher guidance and fosters resilience in advanced learners. Finally, let's consider integrating all these strategies into a comprehensive daily routine. A sample advanced learner day inspired by teaching methods could include morning 30 to 60 minutes listening and summarizing a podcast,